us about your family and GFDF.
Well, the creation of any project, I don't care what it is, and whether it's FDF or starting a business or whatever, requires a lot of support from a variety of people and sources. And some of that support comes from areas you wouldn't even expect it. But in the case of FDF, it came at a time when I was also launching a brand new business. Often have wondered if FDF didn't come into my life, would my business have grown a lot faster in the earlier years than it did? But more importantly, it was my family that bought into this crazy idea of creating FDF. And they were the support, they were the backbone, never once challenged the craziness. And of course, when it started, my kids were young. I mean, they were still in grammar school. But it was my wife who really stepped up to the plate, supported me in all of the activities, along with Don and Ellie Hyatt. I mean, they and my wife were truly the backbone of the back office, if you will, making FDF work and succeed, from helping write the newspaper to scoring. I mean, in the early days, all the scores were done by hand. Don and Ellie and my wife were there with calculators, calculating away the scores and then inputting them and writing them down until we finally developed a computerized program that evolved over the years. We estimated that my wife was the sole input operator for 35 years on anything we did when it came to scores. We estimated that she would enter in at least 1 million digits per FDF, and flawless, which is absolutely amazing. The rules were very clear. Nobody knew the scores, including me, until the night of the banquet. Even the Metropolitan couldn't get the scores out of my wife. I used to drive him nuts. But so the support really was the family and then my business. There was several months every year where if you walked into our office and asked our staff, who do you work for? There would be a period that said, I think we're working for FDF. Because we would really call on our staff to do a lot of support work, whether it's mailings or, in fact, we would even bring them up to FDF to help the management team on the backside get their jobs taken care of, done. So not only did our family put our heart and soul into this project, but certainly the economics were there as well. Yeah.
Tell me about your sons. You have 3 sons, is that correct?
That's correct.
So tell me about your 3 sons briefly and their involvement in FDF.
Well, all 3 sons started out at their respective ages in being part of a dance group and performing. As they got older, became teenagers and into college, they got onto the management team, and each one had a shot at being the managing director of FDF. And with it, they had their own challenges. The idea, well, the boss's son is, you've been selected because. I'd like to think that wasn't the sole criteria. I'd like to think that we selected these people because we believed that they could perform. And from my perspective, perhaps a little biased, I think they performed very, very well. I remember my oldest son, Thanasi, was in charge of, was the executive director of the year we were in LA for the first time. That was probably the epitome of bringing together all kinds of outside activities besides the dance. So one of our 14-year-olds on the management team said, could we bring a magic show? Could we bring David Copperfield? And the answer was, well, why don't you write and find out? And So here's this 14-year-old finds out how to communicate with David Copperfield's agent. The response comes back. David Copperfield says, well, I am working on a project that might cross over on the same dates in New York City. If that does not materialize, I would be more than happy to come. But I will let you know in adequate time. If I can't, you can find a replacement. So several months go by. He writes, and he said, I cannot make it. The engagement I was referring to has materialized. But may I recommend so-and-so? Well, of course, this 14-year-old thought they died and went to heaven. I mean, I'm having this communication with this big shot star, and he's now recommending. Well, we accepted the recommendation, invited that person who came, put on a spectacular magic show. There's an antidote to the magic show I will share with you later. On the entertainment for the dancers, we would have a dance or some kind of a program. So the person in charge of that year said, could we get the Beach Boys and take the grand ballroom and turn it into a beach? So I scratched my head. I said, well, go for it. See if you could do it. Well, the first hurdle was when we went to the hotel and said, we want to bring in sand into the grand ballroom. The hotel goes, oh, we better bring the engineers in and find out how much weight this is going to put on the floor. Could it handle it? And the engineers came back and said, you can bring in X, whatever it is, tons of sand, but we need to have the whole floor of the ballroom covered with plastic, heavy duty plastic, which they did. Brought the sand in, brought in some palm trees. Beach Boys came. The kids had a ball, had a dance. That same year, at opening ceremonies, one of the things that I always wanted to have at an opening ceremonies was somebody like the USC marching band open up, but led in by bagpipers. I love bagpipes. I'm nuts about it. And plus my middle son plays the bagpipes. So they didn't tell me that they pulled this off. So opening ceremonies comes, and here come these bagpipers, of which one of them was my son, followed by the USC marching band. This is at the Westin Hotel in LA. What a spectacular opening. Probably the most spectacular opening we ever had. I don't know if you're familiar with a program called Up With People, but that year, the entertainment committee wanted to see if they could get Up With People to come in and perform. And they did. They agreed, and they came, and they were part of opening ceremony. So that year's opening ceremonies was absolutely spectacular. Going back to the magic show, in the Christian world, we have things like exorcism, concepts of exorcism, concepts of the devil, and so forth. Well, in every magic show, there is some kind of a satanic kind of a skit. Okay, guy. Well, this magician comes out with horns on his head and a red cape and Well, the wives of a number of the priests became really incensed, and more so because the next day was Sunday, and liturgy was going to be held on that stage. So they felt this guy's somehow or other affected the sanctity of the stage by bringing his act, that part of his act, on the stage. And so the wives of these priests got together and forced their husbands to have a exorcism performed on the stage that night after everybody left. On Sunday, traditionally after the church service was over, we had a special brunch for all the priests, their wives, and certain guests, hosted by the Metropolitan. So I said to the Metropolitan, I said, you ought to ask some of the wives what took place last night, something very special. So he looks at me like, you're setting me up, I'm sure. So I said, no, ask. So he asks, and one of the wives very boldly explains what happened, and we had to perform an exorcism on stage, and he goes, oh my God. He says, It goes, you didn't. They said, yes, we did. So I share that because the human aspect of this bishop is incredible. He had a sense about him that was very human. Yes, he was a prelate of the church, one of the highest ranks that he could reach. And yet he never forgot his humanity. He never forgot the simplicity of what life was about. Anyway.
Awesome. Speaking of tolerance, let's talk a little bit about GFDF and tolerance. What is the stance on tolerance? Other religions, other nationalities, where did it start off on tolerance, and maybe where has it evolved to?
Well, FDF is a sponsored program by the church. That was one of the underlining criteria when I created the program, that it had to be a program sponsored by the church. There was a selfish reason for my part as well. Not only that I believe it was good for the church, but I also believe that it's if it was going to succeed, it had to have the support of the church. Now, one of the reasons is because where are our communities? Our communities are associated with churches. And so we had to have a partnership with the church. Now, one of the things that we did after the first year of FDF, we recognized that FDF was a social function. Going back to Father Homer, who said, what is the purpose or value to the church of folk dancing? And my response was, nothing, and yet everything. We took that and we said, what we need to now do is create a youth conference to where our priests can come and we can do educational programs about the faith. So in the second year, we created a youth conference. Give you an example of the dynamics. In the first year of FDF, we had 39 dancers. 2 years later, basically 2 years later, when we officially introduced the youth conference, we had 250 kids show up. Obviously, both from a perspective of parents and clergy, there was some kind of a demand for an educational program that had not existed up to that point. We grew both programs. We got the youth conference up to 1,000 kids attending annually. So, take a break for a second. Give me the question again. I just lost my thought.
Hey, you guys water?
No, I'm fine.
So let's go back to the tolerance. I think you have some really good points of bringing that in. I think tolerance is one of the things that creates community. So let's refer to tolerance and community together on that deal.
So the tolerance, a concept of tolerance was, how do we blend both social and the religious component of the church life? And so by introducing the youth conference, we were trying to show a balance. And not only to show a balance to the clergy, but we were trying to show a balance to our communities. That here the church is also supporting a cultural, historical program, a very strong sense of community, a different type of community, a social community, okay? And at the same time, we're showing you a community of learning, an academic environment. And so hopefully we were trying to balance. Now, you always have this pull and give. There would be those in the clergy that would come to FDF and say, well, why don't we have more religious education? And my challenge would be, because this isn't what this forum is. We have this forum over here. And so therein lies some of the tolerance. But what happened, speaking of tolerance, is as these programs grew to the size that they got, the clergy began to put pressure on the Metropolitan by saying they're too big. We need to split them. We need to break them north and south. The Metropolitan knew my position very clearly. I said, you do that, I'm out of here. By 1983 or 4, somewhere in that area, we had grown the youth conference to 1,000 kids. We were at the Sheraton in Anaheim. Metropolitan calls me up to his suite and he says, I have good news and bad news. And I said, okay, give me the good news. Give me the bad news first, and we can talk about the good news later. He said, well, I've made a decision. We're going to split the youth conference, North and South. I said, bad decision. You will destroy it. But he said, well, I've made that decision. We're going to do that. But I'm not touching FDF. I said, okay. I said, I want nothing to do with the youth conference program anymore. I'm out. Well, a few months later comes back to me and says, I want you to chair and supervise the one for Southern California. And that's a whole nother story. I won't get into that. They had a youth conference in the north. They had one in the south. They had about 300 kids in the north, about 300 kids in the south. Basically, that was the last time there was a youth conference. Let's talk about religious tolerance. Orthodoxy is very tolerant in general of other and respectful of other religions. But however, there are those people in an organization that have their own biases. Now, it's no great secret many of the Christian world, I think they've gotten better at it, but for many, many decades, many elements of the Christian world viewed, say Mormonism as a cult. And there are some people that will tell you that's what it is. And yet, when you look at their doctrine, they believe in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. They recite the Lord's Prayer. They use the creed. So one day I had heard a priest making a comment that, well, there's nothing but a cult. That kind of got my dander up a little bit. So I went to the Metropolitan and I said, what is our position? What do we think about it? He says, we don't have an official position, but what we must accept is that we do not know God's reason for their existence, but they definitely have a purpose. I walked away with that answer and said, wow, that's a very enlightened approach. We don't know what God's purpose is. Didn't put him down. Didn't call him a cult. And I just, again, that goes to the integrity and the intellectual capacity of this man. At least I think.
It's interesting because we talked about maybe your grandparents, your parents, or people that had an influence as you were being raised to make this change, and it's been quite a change in society, in this community, and internationally. But if you think about everything it took to lead up for you to be so motivated to dedicate your financial time, your personal time, your family time, everything you dedicated to that, what I want to know is, what was that energy amoeba? What was the initial punch that started this whole movement? What's the energy source? What happened with that?
Well, that's the energy source for stimulating the movement. Probably goes back way before the movement was even conceived. The integrity within the home. My father and mother, all of us sat at the dinner table. We may not have all had breakfast together, but the dinner table was an absolute must for the family to be together. There were basically no real exceptions to it. It was at the dinner table that both my mother and father would impart to me and my brother basic principles of life. Do good, do the best you can. Try hard. Be respectful for everybody else. Do not discriminate. The early immigrants to this country, and I don't care whether they were Greek, Italian, Russian, whatever they were, all of them served time in the barrel. They all have their own stories. Start with the Irish. to any group that came in the first up through the 1900s, mid 1900s. But they all managed to survive and produce some great results, contributions to what made this country so great. I mean, if you think about America, it is the most sophisticated, exciting quilt made up of every single human being from all over the world. They have a representative here. And some of those, where they came from, hated their neighbor. They came here and can coexist with that same neighbor. That can even work together. That can even create things together. This is an amazing country. And so you look at these things and you look at the lessons that were taught, and the absolute respect and belief that nothing happens unless the good Lord is involved. So I think those are the seats of it. Then you as you grow up in life, you have things that happen. Nothing in life happens by accident. I'm convinced of that. Everything that we encounter will have an effect on us. Maybe not immediately, maybe not a year from now, but it will have an effect. Some minor, some a major impact. There are reasons for everything that happened. We sometimes want to give an answer to things that happen in a simplistic way, and that's not always the case. You can't. Things are very complicated because things develop and grow and so forth. So for me, my home environment was critical. I mean, I'll give you an example. I can remember my dad saying, when you get a job, if you're supposed to be at work at 8, you be there at 7:30. If quitting time is at 5, you leave at 5:30. Do not look at the clock. And we'd say, why, Dad? It's like stealing. If you're not giving your full measure to that employer, you're stealing from them. What am I stealing? You're stealing his time. You're stealing the effort to help his company be successful. These are concepts that are gone today. Who teaches their kids that today? Who sits down and talks to a kid today about their responsibility in society? I mean, we've done such a bad job. We don't educate anybody anymore in this country. We don't educate our kids about the founding roots of this country. If we just take that, if we take the people that signed the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, what an incredible group of human beings from various walks and experiences of life, extremely well educated. Frankly, probably better educated than some of our kids who graduate from college today. Why do I say that? Because they were universally educated in the arts, in philosophy, in history, in business, in economics, in law. So when they were confronted with an issue, what are the things, the tools that they had to draw on? An incredible array of academic knowledge, not a myopic, singular concept. They could call on the great philosophers of Greece, of Rome, the great artists, the artisans, history's lessons. The only revolution in the world, in history, that ever succeeded is the one in the United States. Not the French Revolution, none of them. And why is that? Because we had men that like the men that signed the Declaration of Independence, that had a vision. And we have nobody giving out the vision today. We are a rudderless society.
All right, so tell us. I like a lot of the information there, believe it or not. Some of that historical aspects is real. No, it was awesome. I actually was really into that. I just wanted to keep talking about it.
You're gonna get me. Don't get me started, guys.
I need to draw it back. So what I'm gonna say is, have you ever been told this wouldn't be achieved when you were first starting it? Were you facing anybody that maybe doubted you or told you that this is a big, huge
That's the question of, did anybody, or did even I doubt, or anybody else doubt, that this thing would ever get to where it got today? And the reality is, for me, the answer is no. I have never doubted that anything I set out to do, I would be unable to do it. There's a story behind that. But yes, kids that I've gathered in the St. Spiritan community, who made up the original nucleus of the management team and the leadership and so forth, I would say to them, I would tell them about the story about the Mormons and folk dancing. And I said, one day we will be so big, we will be able to rent the Rose Bowl and perform at the base of the Rose Bowl. And I said, that is our goal, to be so big that we could do that. And the kids would laugh. And I said, everything we do, we have to think of it in its grandiose way. Because I'm a believer that if you don't shoot for the moon, you're never going to get anywhere. You may not make the moon, but you'll sure scare the hell out of it. Okay? And that's how I've always run my life. That gets also back to, why are we failing in America? We're not inspiring young kids. This is the only place in the world you can do whatever you want and be as successful as you want if you're committed to it. And it's like bumper cars. You start out in a project, you start out to do something, and you run into a car and it throws you over here. That's okay. Don't lose your focus. Stay focused. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have to make course adjustments. Stay focused. I mean, we think about Jobs of Apple. We think about the Google guys, the Microsoft guys. All of these guys were focused. They had an idea that we're not going to let go of it. And they made it happen. And thank God we still have people in this country that can grab onto an idea, stay focused, do whatever it takes to make it happen. And they're making it happen. Why don't we have more people like that? Because we're not doing the job at home, and we're not doing the job in the schools. It is a disgrace what we are doing to this country, to the legacy of this country. And anyway, enough of that.
No, what I want to know in that context, because I want the global perspective of what's going wrong, but let's pull it in and say, how does FDF help people center and focus and achieve some of those bigger goals?
But also past versus present, because obviously I think you changed a bit. We can talk about that too.
Well,
the story that you mentioned, the story you said, did you doubt it would work? There's a story behind that.
yeah,
You
but
said,
why
no,
was?
I never doubted.
But did anybody else ever doubt you in
Yeah,
particular?
here's the story.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did people ever doubt you? Rephrase
Oh yeah, of course. People doubted me for many years.
Start again?
People doubted the program's ability to succeed for many, many years. And even in its glory, when it was finally so obvious that it wasn't going to fail, there were those who were doubting Thomas's. But going back to, why did I have the determination that it would not fail, that it would succeed? It goes back to a young boy, me, at age 14, who was a member of an organization called the International Order of Demolay. You may have heard it. It still exists. It is it isn't connected to Masonry, but it is certainly, if we had a supervisor or a supervisory organization, the Masonic Order would certainly be there. So Demolay was for boys, and you had Job's Daughters and Rainbow, two organizations for girls. So at our chapter advisor, every Demolay chapter had a chapter father and a chapter senior advisor. our senior advisor was a gentleman by the name of Doc Mosby. Doc Mosby was a high school teacher as well as a coach on the football team. He was an incredible man, incredibly inspiring with young people. So I'm 14 years old, and as in most organizations, one of the big issues is how do we raise money? Okay, that's nothing new. But how do we raise some money? How do we make some money? So I raised my hand in a stated meeting, and a stated meeting, for those who aren't aware of what that terminology means, it's your monthly business meeting where everybody gathers and we talk about business rather than the ritualistic aspects of the organization. So the question came up how we should raise money. I raised my hand and I said, well, why don't we throw a dance and invite the Job's Daughter girls and the Rainbow girls and the other DMLA chapters in the city. So everybody got excited about the idea. So it was a great idea. And in DMLA, we don't have a president, but we have a master counselor. That's the equivalent of president. So the master counselor, with his authority, says, well, I appoint you, Peter, as chairman of that activity. This is really great. I've now opened my big mouth and I'm chairman of it. So at the end of the meeting, refreshment time, I go up to Doc Mosby and I said, Doc, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. He said, of course you do. I said, well, what should I do? Well, he says, do you have a Sunday suit? I said, yes, sir. Well, you put your Sunday suit on and you go and visit the hotels you think you'd like to see this dance held. And you tell them what you want to do. Oh, Doc, they're not going to talk to a 14-year-old. Well, you go do that. They will. So I thought about it and put on my suit. A few days later, and the hotel that I wanted to host this dance at was the Fairmont Hotel. I mean, I was already thinking big. Let's not go to Motel 6. Let's go to the top. So I ask around, where's the catering department? And so I get ushered to where it is, and I walk into this room, and there's this receptionist behind this desk, and next to her was this elegant gentleman. And I asked, I said, I'm here. I would like to know about renting the Gold Room. I think that's what their main ballroom was. And so she says, well, and what was your intention? I said, we want to throw a dance. Now, most of the hotels in big cities are used to high school proms and so forth. So that wasn't an unusual request. I might have looked a little unusual at my age, but it wasn't an unusual request. So she said, please be seated, and I'll have somebody come and talk to you. I did not know who this man was, but they were talking, and pretty soon he exits. And a few minutes later, I see her picking up her phone, and then she says to me, I will introduce you to the person who's going to interview you. So I walk into this very plush office, and who's behind the desk? The guy that was standing next to her. And so, of course, he starts to ask me questions. What is it we're trying to do, and so forth and so on. And the gentleman behind the desk was a man by the name of Ben Swig, the owner of the Fairmont Hotel. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but when I told my father that night who I met, my father explained to me that was Ben. And I obviously, from that experience, that this man who owned this magnificent facility wanted to take the time to talk to me and to hear my story and to explain to me what was needed. Obviously, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And I don't think I've ever looked back since then. I attribute it to Doc Mosby. Doc Mosby's incredible capacity to deal with young people, and as an adult, to give to that child the concept, I believe in you. I believe you can do it. Therein lies one of the most critical components of FDF, is the ability to say to young people, I, as an adult, believe in you, that you can do it. And it's okay to make a mistake. Don't make the same one twice. Mistakes are things we learn by. But I'm not going to do it for you. You're going to do it. That is a powerful thing. And I think every kid that ever served in the management team, I would be amazed if anybody walked away saying they didn't learn or gain something from it. I'd have adults tell me, how can you possibly allow these young kids to manage a project of $700,000 a year? That's a tragedy. That's a sad statement for adults to make. Are you saying to me you do not trust your child? Yes, they may. They're not going to make the same judgmental decisions you might make. But for God's sake, how are they going to learn? See, when we took away paper routes and watering the neighbor's lawn and cutting the grass and being a box boy and things like that, what did we take away from them? And so all we're doing is propagating, taking away. I remember in Seattle, we hosted the festival in Seattle one year. It was an absolutely beautiful girl, bright. And we had her be the executive director that year. What we always told communities, adults, stay out of the picture. You're not to be involved with the decision-making of the kids. We have an advisory board that oversees it. We're not going to let them get in any trouble, get the church in trouble, everything else. So I'm up there and we're having a meeting and I'm asking her some questions about the process and progress. And she was being very hesitant and she'd constantly look to her father. And I turned to her father, I said, who's running the show, you or her? And I turned back to her, I said, can you make a decision about anything without consulting him? She hung her head and said, no. I literally lost it. I ripped her father down one side and up the other. I said, how despicable that you don't trust a 21-year-old daughter and give her the freedom to succeed or fail at anything. You've taken that away from her. And I cannot tell you, parents, wake up. Let your children demonstrate they have the capacity. Just tell them you have the faith in them. Point to the direction. You know, I've never, as I said earlier, I've never been disappointed by any kid I've ever worked with. Ever. One kid. And the only reason I was disappointed in him, he let his ego get in the way. As I said earlier, ego is okay. We need a little bit of that. It's like spice in food. But don't let it be the dominant factor in your life.
What about the move from national to international appeal?
The expansion of FDF, as it grew, it began to get attention internationally. In the folk dance community, I'll use this word, but it sounds more harsh than it should be. The hardcore aficionados of folk dance, and I'll put it in the context of Greek folk dance, where we've got some incredibly talented entertainers. I mean, these are wonderful people who've devoted their entire life to teaching folk dancing, studying it, performing it. You had those that were very critical. We don't compete in folk dancing. We dance from our heart. Absolutely, you dance from your heart. But where were we going with preserving this folk art? We see what's going on in Greece. We see bastions of folk dancing in various communities around the world, wherever Greeks migrated to. But are we embracing the historical significance? Are we losing some of our ancestral connection? So we had those that were fascinated by what was going on here. And some of the fascination was, how could this possibly be happening? It's not in Greece, but it's happening here on the Western United States. And it's happening with people that are generally second and third generation. They're not no longer that closely connected to the motherland. And so you had this intrigue that got me to saying we need to bring people from around the world in to compete. To, if they didn't want to compete, at least experience what we are experiencing, what we're trying to do. And maybe it might ignite a fire. And so we've had teams from Australia, we've had teams from Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Honduras, Canada, Bulgaria, Greece, Cyprus, Crete, who have come and have performed. The ones from South America, how did that happen? The Metropolitan for all of South America called me one time and he said, can you come down with a team of people and help us? We've got kids that are trying to learn Greek dancing. And perhaps you can bring some people and some music and stuff. And I said, well, what are you using to teach? They said, well, they buy videos from Greece and they try to mimic what they see in the video. I said, oh my God, that's an impossible way to learn to dance. So we came down with good quality music and some instructors. We did it about 3 different times. And we traveled through these various countries on behalf of the Metropolitan Center. And he started to try to develop a similar program down there. His challenge was, again, adults not seeing the value and not really getting behind it. So we thought perhaps we could inspire these people. And I set out to bring up 4 teams from 4 different countries at our expense. And that's how they came. I've also never shied away from trying to expose our people in the years that I was involved to other cultures of folk dancing. And there was one year we were in Phoenix, Arizona with the Folk Dance Festival. And I was pushing very hard to the committee to engage the American Indians in the Arizona area to come and perform for us. And so there was a bit of a, I don't know whether we should or shouldn't. What does it have to do with us? But they did it. Now, the American Indians got on stage and they performed. At the conclusion of their performance, our entire audience, if I had asked them to do this, it probably wouldn't have happened, spontaneously stood up and gave these people a standing ovation. I come walking on the stage with the Metropolitan, and the Indians are crying. And I embrace the lead dancer, and I said, wow. I said, not only did you inspire us, I said, why this emotion? He said, corporate America likes to come to Arizona and other places, other areas where there is a heavy influence of American Indians. And they like to hire us to entertain their attendees. And so we do it. He said, this is the first audience that truly appreciated what we did and understood what we did. Now, if you don't think that doesn't bring a tear to your eye, you're mistaken. If you just think about the history of the American Indian, what he has traveled through, but to be able to perform in front of a group of people that could relate, even though they didn't know how to do those dances or even necessarily what those dances meant, they felt the emotion and the significance of at least what it meant to them and expressed it in their way of applauding and their ovation. A few years later, I got wind of an Eskimo village in the furthest northern regions of Alaska. And it was a chance encounter with an Russian Orthodox priest who said, Peter, there was this village, and I am sorry to say I don't remember the name of the village, but that were originally converted by Russian Orthodox into Orthodoxy. And they perform a historical dance. And the whole message of the dance is their conversion from paganism to Christianity. And I said, "Oh my God, I gotta get these people down here." Now, the Russian priest said, "Well, I want you to know that these people dress in absolute traditional clothing. They don't have clothing like we wear." And the village consisted, I think, of about 200 or 300 people. I said, "Great." I said, "We got to bring them down here." So one of the executive vice presidents of Alaska Airlines was a good friend of mine. And I said to him, I said, "What could you guys do to help us bring about 100 or 120 of the village, these people in this village, to FDF?" Because when I originally looked at the cost, I thought, "Oh my God, the airline cost is going to be staggering." Well, God love Alaska Airlines. They jumped out of the bandwagon, gave us a hell of a discount. And I said, "If we can get them here, I'll pick up all their costs while they're here." So we get them here, and at opening ceremonies, we showcase them. Now, here's what you had. You had grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, teenage kids, little kids, and one mother had a baby in her arm, all dressed in these heavy skins. And this was in Ontario, California that year, okay? So it was kind of not cold, okay? It was hot compared to where they came from. They put on this performance. Now, I didn't tell the Metropolitan who was going to be there. I wanted him to be surprised. And he comes over to me, shakes his head. He says, you never cease to amaze me at what you come up with. The audience was most generous in their applause, and yet kind of, what is this really about? They didn't fully connect the pieces, that these are one of us, meaning one of us in the sense that they celebrate the same religious service that we celebrate. Again, it was one of those events that stunned the audience, that the next night I showcased them again. Now, they came with their priest, was with them. And anytime we had visitors like this, what I would do is I'd make sure they had time at Disneyland, a time at Universal Studios, a tour of Hollywood. And if we had time, we would bring them down to San Diego Zoo. And I'll never forget, they had come back from Disneyland. And their priest comes up to me and says, "I just want you to know, you probably have changed every one of these people's lives forever." He said, "What you have showed them, they have never seen in their life." Now, you can take that both positively and negatively, that we had that kind of an influence. And that maybe some of their young people will say, "I don't want to spend the rest of my life in this village. I want what's out there." That's both good and bad. I say that because I go back to my father's homeland, to Greece, and I see what's happening in the villages. The young people are not content to stay in the village, and so they're leaving. And we're seeing villages diminish in size. And with that, perhaps we're also seeing the loss of some of the folk art, whether it's dancing or music or artwork, also diminishing somewhat. Those are sad commentaries. I hope that doesn't truly happen, but it's certainly, the seed is there of it happening. It's the same thing when we see countries that in the last century and a half that were sending their brightest to come and get educated here. And they'd get educated and tasted what America had to offer and would not go back. That brain drain is a tragedy to those countries. It only impoverishes them. We're seeing that kind of reverse. We're seeing people coming here, getting educated, but not liking all of the politics, going back home. And maybe that's a very good thing. Anyway.
What's the mission? What has there always been the same mission? Has the mission changed from the original mission statement?
The mission of FDF was certainly two-pronged. One, to instill and educate in young people good, strong business principles and ethics, what it takes to run a business. To also instill in them that just because you're young doesn't mean you can't do something. That there are people who believe in you. Your parents believe in you. We believe that you can handle a task that is assigned to you. The other is the community concept, bringing young people together who might never have had an opportunity to meet others of the same ethnic background, the same religion, and to share ideas and thoughts. And to do it in an environment that mandated a level of respect. Respect in the sense that you got on stage, you were willing to put on a costume that somebody might have laughed at you back in your high school or junior high school. You're putting on that skirt? Oh, no, it's a kilt. And it's worn by a lot of guys historically that were pretty brave. Okay? But putting that on and willing to, frankly, risk perhaps being criticized and performing. So it was the ability to bring people together, to enjoy the historical significance of what our ancestors gave us in the form of folk art, of which so much of this folk art has its roots back to the ancient period of Greece.
So let's talk about the mission again really quick, if you could start from the top.
The mission of FDF is essentially two prongs. One has the sense of a business sense, teaching young people about business practices, the ethics of business, the challenges of business, proper planning, budgeting, and so forth. The element of teamwork. If you want the business to succeed, you have to be willing to be part of a team. That team aspect also translates to the other prong, which is the sense of community, bringing people together. And we use the gathering as the tool for gathering is learning to dance Greek. And to do it in a traditional costume that goes with that particular dance. Because each dance has its own unique costume. It also has its unique geographic area. We can look at a costume and say, we know where you're from geographically. But we also know that that particular dance is suited for that costume, or vice versa. And so those are the elements. The dance bringing people together, emphasizing teamwork, emphasizing discipline, emphasizing to try to excel, to reach a level of perfection. We know perfection is a goal. In the Orthodox Church, we talk about theosis, meaning God-like, but not God. So the goal is to try to emulate, to achieve a level of godliness, perhaps, might be a good way. But the word in Greek is theosis. Now, we're human beings, and that's a mighty tall order. And as human beings, we fail. Sometimes we fail at business. Sometimes we fail at in sports, not doing the best job ever. I can remember a parent, and the parent was a medical doctor, And every year the same issue would come up. I don't understand why we have to have competition. My daughter cries at the end when she doesn't win anything. And I'd say to him, well, it always amazes me that you, with your background in academics, would complain about competition. Why can't you teach your daughter to be a good loser, but next year come back and work harder so that she doesn't lose, but to relish in those who have succeeded because they worked very hard to achieve that goal. He came back to me on many occasions. We'd have the same argument. And one day I said to him, you're a specialist in the field of OBGYN. I said, competition is inherent in our DNA. The day the mother is delivering that child is competing to survive. And it doesn't end until the day they're put in a box and 6 feet under. Why are we afraid of competition when we should embrace it to teach us how to be good losers as well as good winners? And how do we change the losing into being a winner? It's fascinating. It's amazing to me. Such a simple concept is so badly distorted. We had a program, we wanted to mimic this program in the West and in the South. And we had what we call the Hellenic Folk Dance Festival started. We got it started, and it was tracking almost exactly like ours. The adults decided that competition wasn't a good thing. They took competition out. They gave awards like honorable mention. And I would go every year and participate, observe. The last time I went is when they introduced this non-competition thing, and the kids in the audience were snickering. This is a joke. What did you just teach every single dancer? Why bother? Why should I come every bloody week and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse to get an honorable mention? We are so afraid that we might injure the child's sensibility or emotion. Kids are very strong, very resilient, also need guidance. Yet, parents step in and screw things up. I know you wanted short sound bites, but you see, I get one thought. One thought leads to another idea. We could go on. You stimulate ideas, and I'll throw.
That's okay. Hey, we're getting done what we need to. What's the obsession behind this? It sounds like it's an obsession for some people.
Well, it's like anything else. You can get absolutely.
Can you contextualize the question?
Give me the question again.
So, what is the obsession for some people with FDF?
It has been said that in some circles of FDF, there's an obsession to the whole project or to just being involved in it. And I guess to a certain degree, there is an obsession. I mean, why would you want to commit, if you're on the management team, hours and weeks of doing what you're asked to do and not being paid for it? Okay. Why would you show up for dance practice every single week for months upon months to refine the quality of a dance that you're trying to perform? Unless there's an element of both obsession, camaraderie, the sense of community again, the sense that I get to be out of the house for a few hours and be with my friends. That's also part of it. And to share with people of my generation my thoughts, my troubles, my joys, and so forth. But there is another higher element of those who become so infatuated with the historical significance of the dance and the desire to want to perfect the performance of it, that I really want to be able to do it in the best possible way I can. Now, there's another element that comes in because you'll get people talking about, well, that's an authentic dance. That's not authentic. Well, that step is authentic. Well, that step is not. The problem with those comments is there were no videos of how that dance was danced 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago. Dancing is an evolutionary process, very subtle. You're seeing somebody dance, and they're at the head of the line, and all of a sudden they introduce an extra beat or extra step. It's in connection with the music, all right. But oh, that looks absolutely great. And as human beings, we like to mimic. So pretty soon we've mimicked that. And now that step is entered into that dance, and now it becomes part of that dance. So one of the challenges we always had was this idea of, is it authentic? And I would give them the same response I just gave you, that there's no way to tell me that it's responsive. What we are doing, and we could be criticized for, is that we have taken a period of time in history and have frozen the movements of what normally is an evolutionary art form. And we've frozen it in time, unchanged. If there's a criticism, we could be criticized for that.
All right, thank you for that. Tell me about the judging of these competitions. We didn't really talk about what the judgment's based on and how somebody wins this. What would be the ideal performance?
Well, judging is a subjective process. There is no absolute way to say that is the way that step was performed is the best. So it is what the judge sees with their eyes. And so what are they seeing? Well, they're seeing a bunch of feet moving. They're seeing bodies moving in a direction, and they're being affected by the costume and how the costume flows as that body is moving in rhythm with the music. So they have a lot of things that are going on. And they're also being affected by two other things, the leader and the one at the end. They will catch their attention. So all of these components go into affecting them. And add to that their own bias. If they're familiar with that dance and they perceive that the dance isn't danced the way they dance it, that's a negative. We allow judges to come out and instruct teams if a team wants to invite a judge to help them learn a dance. They can do that. I don't know if the rule has changed. They were able to do that up to about a month before FDF, and the judge had to extricate themselves from any further work with that committee. We always used to say that the chances are that judge was going to judge that team harder than had they not been a director, because now what we have here is the judge looking at his imparting of his art form, of his instructions. And if he doesn't think you've executed it the way he wanted it, he's going to nail you.
Okay, perfect. Now, can we go over maybe? Yeah, I want to go over one question really quick.
It was just based on this one. But
Okay, go ahead. What is it?
I just wanted to, if you could give us a quick soundbite on just the process of what the judges look at. First, the judges are going to judge by costume. They're going to judge by accuracy of the step to
Right.
Historical record of what was done. They're going to judge by energy level.
Okay.
Like if there's categories like that.
So in one or two sentences, let's just quick soundbite on that. What are the criteria judges base their?
And I'll tell you, the judging criteria has evolved over the years, but it has to do with style. It has to do with what is perceived that particular dance steps should look like. It has to deal with the quality of the music. Are we wearing an appropriate costume for that dance? Words authentic are no longer at all involved in the judging. And is there balance in the line? Is there a proper balance in terms of the way the line moves? So those are the criteria, and the judges have a point score, and I know I'm not going to have this right. I think the point score goes from 1 to 10, and I admit I have forgotten. But
Let's take that. Do you want one more of the judges? Okay. Now this is a very important question. I do want you to try to dial in your thoughts. So if you need a minute to think, go for it. Why should somebody watch or care about this documentary? What's it mean to society or the culture?
Well, if nothing else, perhaps it might inspire other groups to take a step back from where we are in society today and reflect on, is there something that's very important missing in our lives in the sense of community? Now, we can't replicate what the village life looked like. Those days are gone and probably never to come back. But what can we do in a major metropolitan area, or any city for that matter, that can bring together a sense of community? Are there forms in the art world that can help us in that way? Should we as parents begin to reassess where we're putting the emphasis on raising our kids? Is baseball and soccer and all of these sports activities, should they be our primary focus? And worst of all is this incessant idea that at the end of a season of sports, we take all the kids to Fuddruckers and everybody on the team, whether they really won anything or not, gets a trophy. Again, what is the lesson there? What are we teaching kids? It's okay that you didn't win anything. It's okay you didn't achieve. It's okay you did not do your best. You're still going to get a trophy. Who are we satisfying? Are we satisfying the ego of the parent? My kid got a trophy? And destroying the kid's self-esteem? Future self-esteem? Future ability to say, I can achieve? I can do that?
Okay.
I don't know if I answered your question.
What
I got off on a tangent. Throw it again at me, and
No,
I'll
no,
try
I'm
to
going
get
to do another one. These are good.
Okay.
I want you to start by saying, I believe. Now, this is a why statement. You have your what and your how. We know what it is. We know how it works. But why? What's the belief? What is the core belief for this whole organization, either back then or now, however you want to contextualize it?
What would, if somebody asked, what is the core belief of this organization? I think that's a great question. It's the answer that is.
Is it the belief you can do it?
Yeah, it is. It is probably, there is the element of challenge that I can get involved and I can do this. It may also be a thirst for wanting to connect with my ancestral roots in a simple way. It also might be that says, yeah, I'm not afraid of wearing a kilt.
Let's start these statements. Let's give you a bunch of statements to say, we believe or I believe FDF provides.
Okay. I believe that FDF has the potential to provide self-esteem, to challenge people to seek excellence, to want to learn more about their ancestral roots. I believe that it has a powerful effect on the community, both at the local level and at the broader level. When you bring people together from various disparate communities, meeting one another, what do you think the effect is on the strength of the whole? The whole is stronger, not weaker, because they know each other. I mean, you have kids that write to one another. Today it's texting, but they're texting to their friend in Seattle or in Canada or in New York. that they would not have had that connection had it not been for a program like this.
Another belief statement. Go ahead. Give me another one. I believe.
I believe we can use this program not only to strengthen the church's desire of imparting its core beliefs, but to stimulate young people to seek a level of excellence and to have great self-esteem.
What other, you guys? Am I missing something? This is our final. I know we got to wrap up, but
I know you wanted a whole day, so I want to know
know.
what would you have done in a whole day that we haven't done up to this point?
I mean, I covered a lot of my bigger level stuff: the belief statements, the mission statement, the overall impact of this particular program and dancing on the communities. Is there something specifically you want to ask? What are your value words? Go ahead.
I haven't heard you talk too much about just the sheer fun that people have had at FDF over the years. Not just the kids dancing, but the parents and the fact that they've gone on to remain involved in FDF as their kids and grandkids dance. Just the sort of the aspect of joy and fun.
All right, let me rephrase that for you. So we have the serious side, the self-confidence building, the competition, and people are putting on their war paint ready to go out. But there's an element that's a lot lighter than that here. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that light, fun-hearted.
Some people will ask, well, is there a fun aspect or a lightheartedness to this whole program? And there really is. And how you see it is you instead of looking at the stage, you turn around and you look at the audience. And in looking at the audience, you see parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles admiring their children dancing what they may have danced, certainly danced, and bringing back memories of either what their parents or grandparents told them about the old country or their experience because they're immigrants to America. And it rejuvenates their whole spirit. It embraces the concept that, wow, the ancestral experience kind of lives on. So there's this wonderful thing. There was a man, we used to call him the Potato King. He was probably the largest trader of Idaho potatoes. And that's how he got his name, the Potato King. And here's a guy of significant means, and this was in the early years of FDF, and when we still would use bleachers. And he's sitting in the bleachers, and they're not the most comfortable thing, and he's got his $1,000 suit on, and he's sitting at the upper seat, looking down, and I catch him from the corner of my eye, and I turn around and really look at him. And I look down towards the stage, and here he's got this incredibly peaceful and joyous expression on his face. And who's he looking at? His grandchildren. Here's a man in his late 60s looking down at these little kids. And you can just see what's going through his mind. If that, for me, didn't give me inspiration. So, hey, I'm making this guy happy. I'm giving him something that maybe he never thought he'd ever experience. And I think for a lot of people, that's what's going on. People will say, well, it's too expensive. Yeah, it'll cost a family of four a couple of grand. And yet they come every year. They do it year after year after year.
I have a question. Yeah. We talked a lot about, program for the kids. Maybe a couple more specifics on the coaching and also talking about a bit about, and he'll rephrase it, but a bit of specifics on the level of coaching and what was done, and also somewhat about the rite of passage, and also the desire that you saw in the kids to really want to be coached. Because we didn't talk about that too. A lot of kids, of course, have a desire. They want guidance. They want to be coached. They want to be told they can do it. So, from that perspective, if you had any stories or anything about kids that were actively in this because they wanted that business coaching, they wanted to learn.
Okay, you know, you have many different walks of life coming in, from poor to rich, from motivated to non-motivated. What were you seeing when you were involved? What were you seeing from those kids that were really giving it their all, that were motivated? What kind of coaching or what kind of guidance or what kind of self-starting did they have in this program?
I think the biggest aspect of the coaching is imparting in them that you really believed in them. The kids are going to be very suspect. You can say, I believe in you.
Can we go more to specifics though? I mean, we have a lot of that about saying I believe, but I mean, is there? I mean, you say you have budgets and they have to go.
Okay, if you want to talk about the mechanics. All right, let's talk about the mechanics.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
All right. In the management team, each person on the team had a specific role to perform. Along with that meant that they had to have a budget for their activity that they were responsible for. Each one had a perk chart. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the term perk chart. It comes out of the engineering world. It is identifying all of the things you need to do in order to come to an ultimate conclusion. And it measures time. I'm going to have this piece completed on this date, this piece on this date, and so forth. Each member would have a perk chart. I don't think they use those anymore. That was my thing. I insisted on it. If they're not using it, it's too bad because it keeps people focused and on attention. And when we would gather, everybody would have present where they were. And then we had the master perk chart, everybody's job. Where are we on achieving it? It kept people honest. It kept them accountable. And more importantly, they had to admit to their peers on the committee, I'm either falling behind or I'm succeeding. That's a tough thing for young people to visually tell to your peers, I'm not cutting it. And so, and then it's not pointing a finger, because I wouldn't tolerate that. Maybe they need help. So how do we collectively get together to help? Not to do it. How do we get together to help?
What's one thing, if you could tell your great-great-grandchildren about the difference this has made in the world, what would you tell them?
It has brought people together in a more loving way. It has allowed people to taste and experience not only their culture in an interesting art form, but also the history, a part of the history of their ancestors. A lot of Greek dancing, by the way, has a historical significance to, in some cases, an act. There's a dance called the Dance of the Seleucids. These were women who, rather than be subjugated by the Turkish Empire, and that meant being abused and raped, decided that they would dance off of a cliff. And it's a very powerful historical activity. It really took place. They danced, and rather than be subjugated to the onslaught of the Turkish invasion, they danced, and then each one fell off the cliff.
What would you say to kids? Let's say this keeps going on 100 years.
We got.
Let me just ask this one last. This is the last question I want to ask.
Okay.
When you're gone and this thing's still going on, what's one piece of wisdom you want to tell the future of FDF?
Embrace the experience and joy of participating in something that its roots go back centuries.
Let's do it again. Let's do another soundbite. If you could speak to the children 100 years from now on this, what would you tell them? And look at me when you do it.
embrace the significance of the art form, not necessarily because it's Greek or anything else, but the significance of the art form, the discipline that it presents to you, and the joy to be able to master that art form.
That's good. That's pretty good. That was probably one of the best sound bites right there, I think, personally. Yeah. Oh, good. Good. Now, what we would have done if we did have more time, we would have got a little more technical, but I do think we have a lot of technical with your B-roll. We have a lot of technical already with all the archives of footage. You know, I wanted, so we got some of the technical, but I think we got all of, like, the vision stuff is, I think, really good.
Well, if we ever need to, we can do it again.
Yeah, or we can do sound bites. If we don't want to record, we can always do, you know, just sound, voiceover stuff, which I think would be the next step. If we needed to get more content from you, it would cut the cost significantly just to do voiceover. Should we be missing anything, right, Lorenzo?
I got a quick one. Actually.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
just one more since we're still running. Do you feel like FDF has been a success?
I've been asked the question, do I think FDF has been a success? I think it's been an extraordinary success. And its roots now are so well planted that I think it would be very difficult for it to be destroyed or stopped. I'm not saying it can't, but I think it would be difficult. It is the second oldest program of its kind, only exceeded by the Hawaiian Hula Festival. Programs like this generally have a life expectancy of about 15 or 18 years. One of my favorite programs for young people was the Western Band Regional Competition, where in Long Beach every year for 18 years, 10,000 high school kids who played in bands, high school bands, would march up Ocean Boulevard into the convention center performing. It was a spectacular sight. It was an inspiration to see it. In its 18th year, it was last year it was done. Tragedy was, and by the way, we took some things of theirs. They had a sweepstakes performance. We embraced that on our FDF. They published a newspaper. We published a newspaper. I thought they did some good things. But the families that were the backbone got tired. And there was no succession. There was nobody willing to put in the time and effort. That's sad. That's really sad.
How long has FDF been around?
We're 40 years.